Her true story from Michigan Nov. They laughed when I fell, so I changed my will that night. The snow in Michigan has a way of falling silently, blanketing the world in a pristine, forgiving white. But there was no silence in my house that evening, only the sound of laughter. It wasn't the warm, joyful kind. It was the sharp, savage laughter that cuts deeper than any broken bone. It was my 72nd birthday, and my daughter, Jessica, and her husband, David, were hosting a small dinner party for me. Or so they said. The dining room table, the one Arthur and I had saved for months to buy in 1983, was set with our good Chinoth, delicate blue and white pattern with tiny roses that had belonged to my mother. Jessica had insisted on using it, though I noticed she handled each plate like it was made of glass that might shatter at any moment. "Mrs. Evans, this roast is absolutely divine," said Martha, David's supervisor's wife, a woman whose voice carried the practiced sweetness of someone accustomed to making pleasant conversation. She wore a burgundy dress that was perhaps a size too small, and her smile never quite reached her eyes. "You must give me the recipe." "Oh, that's nothing special," I replied, feeling a small flutter of pride despite myself. "Just the way my mother taught me, low and slow, with plenty of rosemary from the garden." "Garden?" piped up Kevin, David's young colleague from the insurance office, nervously adjusting his tie. "You still maintain a garden at your age? That's incredible." I was carrying the cake from the kitchen, the very same vanilla sponge with buttercream frosting I'd baked for Jessica every year since she was a little girl. The recipe was written on a yellowed index card in my mother's careful script, stained with decades of use. My hands, now spotted with age and marked by arthritis, trembled slightly. Maybe it was the weight of the cake, or maybe it was the crushing weight of their indifference I'd been carrying for months. The cake was perfect 3 layers of golden sponge, each one light as air. Covered in swirls of buttercream roses I'd piped with the same care I'd used when Jessica was 7 and believed I could create magic in the kitchen. 72 pink candles flickered like tiny prayers in the dim dining room light. My foot caught on the edge of the new, expensive Persian rug they'd insisted on buying, a deep burgundy monstrosity that cost more than Arthur's monthly pension. "It really elevates the space, Mom," Jessica had said when they rolled it out, not mentioning that it covered the beautiful hardwood floors Arthur had refinished by hand the summer before Jessica started high school. The world tilted. Time stretched like taffy, and I watched in horror as the cake flew from my hands in a slow-motion arc, a white comet of sugar and regret. The buttercream roses I'd so carefully crafted became projectiles, splattering against the wall, the furniture, the precious rug. I went down after it, a clumsy, undignified heap on the floor, my hips striking the hardwood with a sickening thud that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. For a single, solitary second, the room was frozen. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant rumble of a snowplow on Maple Street, the soft tick of the mantel clock Arthur had given me for our 15th anniversary. Martha's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down. Kevin cleared his throat uncomfortably. Someone's chair creaked. Then the sound came, not a gasp of concern, not the shuffle of feet rushing to help, not even a simple, "Are you okay?" Laughter. It started with David, a low, guttural chuckle that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep and ugly inside him. His shoulders shook as he tried to contain it, but failed miserably. Then Jessica joined in, a high, piercing peal of mirth that echoed off the walls we had built together, the sound bouncing around the room like a ricocheting bullet. "Oh my God, Mom, you're such a klutz," she managed to get out between gasps, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye with the back of her hand. She made no move to help me. Her only concern was for her new possession. "Look at the rug, it's covered in frosting. David, that stain is never going to come out. Do you know how much this cost?" I lay there on the floor, a 72-year-old woman surrounded by the wreckage of my own birthday cake, my hip screaming in protest. Buttercream seeping into the fibers of the rug like tears into a handkerchief. The pink candles, still lit, flickered mockingly from where they'd scattered across the floor. I looked up and saw them, my daughter and her husband, clutching their sides as if they were watching the funniest show on earth. Martha had gone pale, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Kevin was staring at his lap, his face flushed with second-hand embarrassment. But Jessica and David, they were in their own world, a world where an old woman's fall was entertainment, where dignity was a punchline. And in that moment, lying there among the ruins of my birthday cake, I understood. They weren't just laughing at an accident, they were laughing at me. At my age, at my frailty, at my very existence. To them, I wasn't a mother, a woman who had given birth to Jessica after 18 hours of labor, who had walked the floors with her when she had colic, who had taught her to ride a bicycle and helped her with algebra and held her when her first boyfriend broke her heart. I was a punchline. A piece of old, inconvenient furniture that had finally, comically, toppled over. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I pushed myself up, using the nearby armchair for leverage, the blue velvet chair that Arthur had bought me for our 25th anniversary. The one Jessica had been eyeing with distaste, muttering about how it dated the room. My body ached, my hip throbbed, but my heart felt nothing but a cold, clear void. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked toward my bedroom, cake frosting still clinging to my cardigan, the sound of their subsiding giggles following me down the hall like mocking ghosts. They didn't even notice I was gone. Martha's voice, tight with discomfort, drifted after me. Perhaps I should help clean up. But Jessica's response was swift and dismissive. Don't worry about it. She'll get over it. She always does. The fall wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the end. Full stop. My late husband, Arthur, and I bought this house in 1978. It wasn't much than simple ranch-style home on the outskirts of Grand Rapids, with a patchy lawn that looked like a moth-eaten sweater and a wind-battered oak tree in the front yard that the realtor apologetically suggested we might want to remove. But to us, it was a palace. It was our fortress against the world. Arthur worked the line at the General Motors plant for 42 years, his hands growing more calloused with each passing season, but never losing their gentleness when they touched my face. With those same hands that assembled car parts day after day, we built our life right here, brick by brick, dream by dream. I remember the weekend we built the fieldstone fireplace in the living room. It was July, and the heat was so oppressive that the air seemed to shimmer. We'd driven out to a quarry in Kalamazoo to select each stone personally, Arthur running his fingers over the surfaces like he was choosing diamonds. Every stone has to be perfect, Maggie, he'd said, squinting against the sun. This fireplace is going to outlast us both. We worked from dawn to dusk that weekend, mixing mortar, fitting stones, Arthur's t-shirt soaked with sweat, my hands raw and bleeding from handling the rough surfaces. But when we finally lit the first fire that autumn, watching the flames dance against the stones we'd chosen together, Arthur put his arm around me and said, "This is our hearth, Maggie. This is where our family's warmth will come from." Now that same hearth was a backdrop for my humiliation, its stones bearing silent witness to how far we'd fallen. This house watched Jessica grow from a chubby-cheeked toddler to the woman who now treated me like an unwelcome guest. It absorbed the pencil marks on the doorframe measuring her height marks Jessica had painted over last month, declaring them unsightly. It remembered the sound of her practicing the clarinet for the school band, the same clarinet that now gathered dust in the closet because she'd decided it was too loud for the house's aesthetic. It held the memory of every slammed bedroom door during her teenage years, every tearful phone call about boys, every proud moment when she graduated valedictorian from East Grand Rapids High School. After Arthur passed away from a massive heart attack 5 years ago, dropping right there in our kitchen while making his morning coffee, gone before the paramedics could even arrive, the silence in the house was deafening. Every corner held his absence. His coffee mug still sat in the sink. His reading glasses still lay folded on the kitchen table next to yesterday's newspaper. His side of the bed remained cold and untouched. So when Jessica and David suggested they move in, I saw it as a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. "We don't want you to be alone, Mom," she'd said, her voice dripping with a practiced sincerity I now recognized as pure manipulation. She'd sat across from me at the kitchen table, her manicured hands folded precisely, her expression carefully arranged into one of filial concern. "This house is too big for you now. And, with Dad gone, well, we just think it would be better if we were here. We'll take care of you, we're family." I believed her. God help me, I wanted to believe her. The prospect of sharing holidays again, of hearing laughter in the hallways, of not eating dinner alone while watching the news, it seemed like a gift from heaven. But their definition of family was different from mine. They moved in like conquistadors claiming new territory and began a slow, methodical erasure of me and everything Arthur and I had built together. My needlepoint armchair, the one Arthur bought me for our 25th anniversary because he'd noticed me admiring it in the Steelcase showroom downtown, was replaced by a sleek leather monstrosity that was cold to the touch and made embarrassing sounds every time you shifted position. "It's much more contemporary, Mom," Jessica had explained, not meeting my eyes. "Your old chair was just tired." The scent of my pot roast, which used to fill the house on Sundays and draw neighbors to knock on the door asking for the recipe, was deemed too heavy and outdated. My cast-iron Dutch oven, seasoned by 40 years of Sunday dinners, was banished to the basement. In its place came their kale smoothies and quinoa bowls, their almond milk and gluten-free everything, their endless discussions about clean eating and toxic ingredients while they turned their noses up at the meals that had nourished our family for decades. The family photos that had lined the mantelpiece, pictures of Arthur and me on our honeymoon at Niagara Falls, Jessica's school pictures from kindergarten through graduation, our Christmas mornings and summer vacations were quietly removed and stored in a box in the garage. "The house needs a more minimalist aesthetic," David had explained, as if my life's memories were clutter to be tidied away. And then came the rules. So many rules. No cooking with garlic or onions, the smells were too strong and lingered. No watching television after 9 p.m. because they needed their sleep hygiene. No having friends over without 48 hours notice because it disrupted their routine. No rearranging furniture because they'd optimized the feng shui. No opening windows because it compromised the air filtration system they'd installed. One evening, I was making my mother's chicken and dumplings recipe, the one that had been in our family for 3 generations. The kitchen was filled with the rich, comforting aroma of herbs and slow-simmered broth. I was humming softly to myself, feeling more like myself than I had in months, when Jessica burst through the door like a hurricane. "Mom," she snapped, her face contorted with irritation. "What is that smell? We talked about this. Strong odors are not okay. They get into the fabrics, the curtains, everything. It's going to take days to air out." I stood there, wooden spoon in hand, watching 40 years of family tradition disappear into the garbage disposal at her insistence. That night, I ate a sad little salad while they ordered sushi, discussing the purity of their meal, while I mourned the loss of my mother's recipe. The isolation was systematic and complete. When my friend Eleanor called to invite me to our weekly bridge game, Jessica would intercept the call. "Mom's not feeling well today." I'd hear her say, her voice syrupy with false concern, "She really needs to rest, you understand." When I tried to protest, Jessica would fix me with a look of wounded disappointment. "Mom, I'm just trying to protect you. You've been so tired lately. Everyone's noticed. We just want what's best for you." Slowly, inexorably, my world shrank. The garden Arthur and I had tended together became overgrown because David declared it high maintenance and hired a landscaping company to replace my vegetable plots and flower beds with low-maintenance native grasses. My friends stopped calling, my routines disappeared, my voice, quite literally, was silenced. And then came the talk of the will. It was never direct, always couched in concern, always presented as though they were doing me a favor by bringing up such an unpleasant topic. "Mom, we were just thinking," David would say, settling into Arthur's favorite recliner like he owned it, "it's probably a good idea to make sure all your paperwork is in order, you know, just in case. At your age, you never know what might happen." His eyes would glint with a greed he barely tried to conceal, lingering on the china cabinet, the antique secretary desk that had belonged to my grandmother. The collection of first edition books Arthur had accumulated over the years. Jessica would nod along, her expression perfectly arranged into one of dutiful concern. "It's just that these things can be so complicated if they're not handled properly," she'd add, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We don't want you to have to worry about any of that. We can take care of everything for you." They knew everything: the house, Arthur's pension, the life insurance policy, the small savings account we'd built up over 42 years of careful living was left to Jessica. The will Arthur and I had drawn up named her as the sole beneficiary of our life's work, our decades of sacrifice and saving. At the time, it had seemed natural, obvious. She was our only child, our precious daughter, the center of our universe. Now I realized the truth that had been staring me in the face for months. They weren't living with me out of love or concern. They were squatting on their inheritance, impatiently waiting for the current tenant Meadow vacate the premises. Every morning, I could feel their eyes on me, calculating, waiting. Every cough was assessed for its severity. Every stumble was noted and discussed in hushed tones when they thought I couldn't hear. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was an obstacle between them and their future financial security. That night, sitting in the worn velvet chair in my bedroom, the one piece of furniture they hadn't gotten around to replacing yet. Though I'd heard Jessica on the phone with a furniture store discussing updating the master suite, I didn't cry. Crying was for the woman I used to be, the woman who still hoped for a scrap of love, a moment of genuine care. A sign that somewhere inside my daughter's heart was the little girl who used to crawl into my lap when she was scared. I was someone new now, a woman forged in the fire of their laughter, tempered by months of systematic humiliation. They mistook my silence for weakness, my age for irrelevance. They had forgotten one crucial detail that would prove to be their undoing. While they were living in my house, spending my money, and planning my funeral, I was the one still living in my right mind. I opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand, the same oak nightstand Arthur had built for me during the first year of our marriage, when we couldn't afford to buy furniture. Beneath a stack of old letters from Arthur love notes he'd left on my pillow during business trips, anniversary cards with his carefully penned promises of forever there, was a small, worn address book. His handwriting, a strong, steady script that hadn't changed in all our years together, had listed a name and number under L for lawyer, Bill Thompson. Arthur's best friend since they'd served together in Vietnam, a man who'd stood as best man at our wedding and godfather to Jessica. The next morning, I waited until the sound of their car faded down the street. Jessica had announced they were going furniture shopping, just browsing, she'd said, but I'd seen the way her eyes lit up when she mentioned a particular bedroom set she'd been eyeing. David had been scrolling through real estate apps on his phone at breakfast, muttering about property values and market timing. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the number with fingers that didn't shake, with a voice that didn't waver. A voice, older but still firm, answered on the second ring. "Thompson Law." "Bill, it's Margaret Evans," I said, my own voice surprisingly steady, clear, decisive. "I need to see you. I need to make a change to my will, today." There was no surprise in his voice, just a quiet understanding that spoke of years of friendship and professional experience. "Of course, Maggie, I have an opening at 11. Can you make it to the office, or would you like me to come to you?" "I'll come to you," I said firmly. "I need to get out of this house." An hour later, I sat across the heavy oak desk from him, in an office that smelled of old paper and integrity, of justice and fair dealing. The walls were lined with law books and certificates, photographs of Bill with Arthur at various stages of their lives, young soldiers, young fathers, grandfathers proud of their achievements. Bill listened without interruption as I told him everything, my voice never wavering. I told him about the rules and the isolation, about the systematic erasure of my life and Arthur's memory, about the way they spoke about me as if I were already dead. I told him about Martha's pot roast recipe requests and Kevin's genuine admiration for my garden and how those small kindnesses had highlighted the cruelty I'd been accepting as normal. When I described the fall, the laughter, the complete absence of concern for my well-being, Bill's jaw tightened. His hands, spotted with age like mine, gripped the edge of his desk. "Arthur always said you were the strongest woman he ever knew," he said quietly when I finished. "He'd be proud of you right now, Maggie, and he'd be ashamed of Jessica." He pulled out the existing will, the one that named Jessica as the sole beneficiary of our life's work, and set it on the desk between us like a document awaiting trial. With a few decisive keystrokes on his computer, he began to draft the new one. "And who?" he asked gently, peering at me over his spectacles with kind eyes that reminded me so much of Arthur's. "Do you wish to be the new beneficiary, Margaret?" I didn't hesitate for a second. The answer had come to me in the middle of the night, crystal clear and absolutely right. "The Kent County Animal Shelter." I said, "Arthur always loved dogs. We had a golden retriever named Rusty. When Jessica was little, she adored that dog. Arthur used to say that dogs were more loyal than most people. He was right." Bill smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. Rusty was a good dog. I remember him. Arthur brought him to the office sometimes. He began typing, his fingers moving with the precision of decades of legal practice. "The shelter is going to be very surprised and very grateful, Maggie. This will make a real difference in a lot of animals' lives." An hour later, I walked out of that office with a notarized copy of my new last will and testament tucked safely in my handbag, along with a business card for a woman named Sandra Martinez, who Bill assured me was the best real estate agent in Grand Rapids. "You're going to need somewhere to live, Maggie," he'd said, walking me to the door with his hand gently on my elbow. "And you're going to need it soon. Sandra will help you find something perfect, something that's yours and only yours." I didn't go back to the Housenaut yet. Instead, I took a taxi to a clean, respectable, extended-stay motel on the other side of town, the kind of place that catered to business travelers and people in transition. The room was small but spotless, with a tiny kitchenette and a view of a parking lot that somehow felt more welcoming than the house I'd called home for 45 years. From the motel's small business center, I mailed a certified copy of the new will to my own address, addressed to Mrs. Jessica Collins. I also called Sandra Martinez and scheduled an appointment to look at condominiums the next day. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking to the sound of whispered conversations about my condition and their concerns. The letter arrived 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning while Jessica and David were having their usual breakfast of steel-cut oats and organic blueberries. I can picture the scene perfectly, because I know my daughter's routines as well as I know my own heartbeat. She would have been scrolling through her phone, probably checking social media or reading about some new wellness trend, when the mail slot would have clanged. David would have retrieved the mail, sorting through bills and advertisements with the casual efficiency of someone who'd appointed himself master of the house. Then he would have seen it, the thick, cream-colored envelope with the return address of Thompson Law, addressed to Mrs. Jessica Collins in Bill's careful script. I can imagine the look that passed between them, a look of smug anticipation, probably assuming I'd finally gotten around to updating some minor detail in their favor, perhaps increasing Jessica's inheritance or simplifying the probate process for their convenience. Jessica would have opened it with the casual confidence of someone expecting good news, perhaps even smiling slightly as she unfolded the legal pages. I can picture the exact moment when the words penetrated her consciousness, the color draining from her face as she read the legal, irrevocable language that cut her out of my life as cleanly and completely as a surgeon's scalpel. The way her hand would have started to shake, making the papers rustle like autumn leaves. "David," she would have whispered, her voice barely audible. "David, look at this. This can't be right." The silence that would have followed as they both read and reread the document, hoping they'd misunderstood, hoping it was some kind of clerical error, some mistake that could be easily corrected with a phone call. But there it was, in black and white, notarized and filed. Margaret Elizabeth Evans, being of sound mind and body, hereby revokes all previous wills and testaments and bequeaths her entire estate to the Kent County Animal Shelter. My phone, which had been blissfully silent on my motel nightstand, began to vibrate with a furious intensity around 10:30 that morning. The display lit up with Jessica's name, again and again and again, 10 calls, 15, 20, 25. I let every single one go to voicemail. Finally, around noon, I picked up the phone and played the messages. The progression was fascinating to witness a masterclass in the stages of grief, compressed into a series of increasingly desperate recordings. The first message was confused. "Mom, I just got some paperwork from Bill Thompson's office. I think there might be some kind of mistake. Can you call me back?" The second was concerned. "Mom, where are you? We came home and you're not here. Your car is still in the driveway, but your purse is gone. I'm worried. Please call me." By the fifth message, confusion had turned to panic. "Mom, this will thing it says you're giving everything to an animal shelter. That's impossible. You love me. You wouldn't do this to me. Something's wrong. Are you sick? Did someone force you to sign this?" The 10th message was angry. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear and leave some crazy legal document behind. If you're trying to make some kind of point, you've made it. Now come home so we can talk about this like adults." But it was the 15th message that revealed the truth of who my daughter had become and who she'd always been, underneath the carefully constructed facade of filial duty. Her voice was raw and screeching, filled with a venomous blend of panic and entitlement that made my blood run cold. "Mom, what the hell is this? Is this some kind of sick joke? You can't do this. You can't give our house to a bunch of stray dogs. Have you completely lost your mind? This is theft. This is elder abuse. David says we can contest this. We can prove you're not competent. You call me back right now. You will regret this, I swear to God. That house is ours. We've been taking care of you. We've been sacrificing our lives for you, and this is how you repay us. Our house." Even now, even faced with the consequences of her cruelty, she didn't get it. The messages continued for days. David left several too, his voice tight with barely controlled rage, threatening legal action, demanding I be reasonable, insisting they had rights and expectations that couldn't simply be dismissed. On the third day, Jessica must have called every motel in the city because she found me. I was sitting in the small lobby, reading a book and sipping chamomile tea from a paper cup when the automatic doors burst open like something out of an action movie. Jessica stood there, her hair disheveled, her usually perfect makeup smeared, clutching the legal papers in her hand like a weapon she was ready to use. "You have no right," she screamed, her voice echoing off the lobby walls and causing the night clerk to look up in alarm. Several other guests stopped their conversations to stare. "We've been taking care of you. We've been sacrificing everything for you. We live there." I calmly took another sip of my tea and looked at my daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since she'd become this stranger who wore my child's face. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were red-rimmed and wild. "You weren't taking care of me, Jessica," I said, my voice quiet but carrying clearly across the suddenly silent lobby. "You were warehousing me. You were waiting for me to die. When you stood there and laughed as I lay on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my own birthday cake, you weren't just laughing at an accident. You were laughing at your inheritance. You thought it was guaranteed. You thought I was too old, too weak, too grateful for your sacrifice to ever stand up for myself." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of frustration and loss, not remorse. Not onslaught in any of her messages, not standing there in that motel lobby had she apologized. Not once had she acknowledged that laughing at my fall was cruel. Not once had she seemed to understand that I was a human being deserving of basic dignity and respect. "Mom, please," she whimpered, her tone shifting to the manipulative sweetness I now recognized so clearly. "It was a mistake. People laugh when they're nervous sometimes. We can fix this. Just change it back. We're family. Family forgives each other." I placed a few dollar bills on the table for my tea and stood up slowly, my hips still aching from the fall but my spine straight with newfound strength. I walked over to her and looked my daughter, the child I had carried for 9 months and loved for 38 years, directly in the eye. "There are some things in this world you can't take back, Jessica," I said softly, "and laughing at your mother's fall is one of them. You want to talk about family? Family doesn't treat each other like burdens to be managed until they can be disposed of. Family doesn't systematically erase someone's life and call it helping. Family doesn't count the days until the inheritance check clears." I turned toward the hallway that led to my room, then paused and looked back at her one final time. "Enjoy living in my house, Jessica, because as long as I am drawing breath, that is all you will ever do. Live in it, but never own it, never sell it. Never profit from 45 years of your father's and my hard work. The dogs at the shelter will appreciate it more than you ever did." I walked away then, down the hall to my quiet room, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the motel lobby, clutching a piece of paper that was no longer her future, but a testament to her failure as a daughter and as a human being. Through my room's thin walls, I could hear her making phone calls to David, to lawyers, to anyone who might tell her what she wanted to hear. But Bill Thompson had done his work well. The will was ironclad, my mental competency well documented, and the trail of their mistreatment carefully preserved in witness statements from neighbors who'd watched my gradual isolation with growing concern. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new condominium, a bright, airy place with 2 bedrooms and a small balcony where I've started a container garden. Tomatoes and herbs, nothing fancy, but they're mine. Sandra Martinez found it for me, and Bill Thompson handled the purchase with the same careful attention he'd given to rewriting my will. I volunteer at the Kent County Animal Shelter twice a week now. The dogs don't care that I'm 72. They don't laugh when I move slowly or need to sit down to catch my breath. They're just grateful for gentle hands and kind words, for someone who sees their worth and treats them with dignity. The staff there knows about the inheritance they'll receive someday, though I asked Bill to keep the amount confidential until after I'm gone. They've already started making plans a new facility, better medical equipment, more resources for finding homes for animals that others have discarded. It fills me with a peace I never thought I'd feel again. Jessica and David still live in my house. They can't sell it, can't refinance it, can't use it as collateral for anything. According to Bill, who keeps me updated, they've had to take on roommates to help with the utilities and maintenance costs. The beautiful, expensive rug that was more important than my dignity is probably stained permanently with buttercream frosting, a daily reminder of the moment they revealed who they really were. Eleanor found me through the grapevine and invited me back to Bridge Club. My garden club friends welcomed me with open arms and understanding smiles. I've discovered that the world is full of people who understand the difference between growing old and becoming invisible, between needing help and being dismissed. I think about Arthur every day, especially when I'm working in my little container garden or reading in the recliner I bought for my new living room, a soft, comfortable chair that makes no embarrassing sounds and holds me like a gentle embrace. I think he would be proud of the woman I became in that motel lobby, the woman who finally said, "Enough." Sometimes I imagine what would have happened if Jessica had rushed to help me when I fell, if she'd shown even a moment of genuine concern for my well-being instead of her precious rug. Would I have forgiven the months of systematic erasure? Would I have overlooked the rules and the isolation? I honestly don't know, but that's not the choice she made. She chose laughter over love. She chose cruelty over compassion. She chose to see her aging mother as an obstacle instead of a human being deserving of respect. The dogs at the shelter will never make that choice. They understand loyalty in a way my daughter never did. If you have ever been made to feel small in the home you built, if you have ever been treated as a burden by the very person you gave life to, if you have ever swallowed your pain in silence while others planned your future without consulting you, listen to me now. That silence is not weakness, it is not resignation, it is not acceptance of your fate. That silence is power, gathering like a storm on the horizon, building strength with every dismissive comment, every cruel laugh, every moment when your worth is diminished by those who should cherish it most. And when you finally choose to unleash that power, when you finally say enough and mean it with every fiber of your being. It will change everything. You are not too old to start over. You are not too weak to stand up for yourself. You are not obligated to accept mistreatment because it comes wrapped in the disguise of family duty or care. Your life, your dignity, your peace of mind, these things are not currency to be spent purchasing someone else's temporary kindness. They are treasures to be guarded, respected, and honored by those who claim to love you. If they won't honor those treasures, then perhaps it's time to find those who will. The dogs at the shelter understand this instinctively. They know the difference between someone who feeds them out of obligation and someone who feeds them out of love. Maybe it's time we all learn to be as wise as rescue dogs. Maybe it's time we all learned that loyalty is earned, not inherited. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we all learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who mistake your love for weakness. I am 72 years old. I live in a condominium with a beautiful balcony, and my world is finally my own. I traded a house full of bitter expectations for a small space filled with peace. The dogs at the shelter don't care about my will, they only care about a gentle hand and a kind word. They taught me that true family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you fall and who would rather lick your tears than laugh at them.